We are back with another episode of App Stories. This week's show is brought to you by Collide, SourceGraph, and Revenue Cat. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're halfway through Automation April, which we talked a little bit about in the pre-show for App Stories Plus subscribers. It's been a lot of fun so far. We've gotten, I think, really great reactions for the various things we're doing, whether it's articles on Mac Stories or this show or the things going on in Discord and for Club Mac Stories. There's a lot going on and still a lot to go.
Yes, we are halfway through the month of April, but the Automation April Shortcuts contest, the entries close in just a couple of days on April 20th. So last few days to submit up to 2 shortcuts for consideration from the panel of judges that we've assembled, the 3 of us at Mac Stories, plus 7 other people that are helping us out to judge all of the submissions, and we're getting many submissions from people. So it's going to take us a while to come through the whole list of entries that we've received. But just a couple of days left there. So keep an eye out for for updates on Mac Stories in terms of whether we may be doing another workshop on Discord, for example, to give you some final ideas, some final inspiration for your shortcuts. And but that of course doesn't mean that our Automation April, the special event we're doing, wraps up with the contest, because we're gonna keep going. We have the whole month of April to fill with content, with activities on the Discord, articles on Mac Stories, episodes of App Stories, Mac Stories Weekly, and as I mentioned, the channels on Discord for Plus and Premier members. So the contest is almost done, meaning, the entries are almost closed, but you still have a couple of extra days. And then we're going to get through the whole month of April, and we will continue with our special contest. And then at the very end, most likely, as I mentioned in the pre-show, toward the end of April or the beginning of May, we will announce the winners of the contest, and that's going to be fun.
Right. And the only other thing I guess I'd mention is we're doing lots of giveaways, both in Mac Stories Weekly and in our Discord.
So we have all types of members, right?
Yes, all different levels. And what I really like, at least because it reduces my workload, is that in Discord, Alex made us a bot, which with one click, anyone can enter one of those giveaways. And then when I close the giveaway, I hit my own admin button, which randomly picks the winners, their correct number, and I just send out an email and I'm done. It's really nice. But yes, we're doing different giveaways, both in the newsletter to all club members, as well as some exclusive ones in the Discord as well. All right, Federico, I thought this week we ought to talk a little bit about some of the shortcuts that we've been working on. I know you've been working on an awful lot. I feel like I can't keep up, Federico. You've done 20 already. I've done, I think it's 4 total, and 3 of them are related. But I thought we'd talk a little bit about what we've created so far, so that we can talk about some of the things that we explored and what we think are some of the highlights in terms of techniques and integrations for those shortcuts.
Right. Yeah, I've been very busy, working through this archive of shortcuts that I've prepared for Automation April, and I've shared 20 so far. I have another 10 coming for a total of 30 shortcuts that I will be releasing this month on Mac Stories. And I thought I would hit the highlights of some of them, because I think some of the techniques and some of the ideas that I've used can be useful for others and can be useful in general, like even outside of the contest and Automation April. Like these are ideas that you can apply, months from now in whatever shortcut you will be working on. The first one I want to mention is a Mac OS one. So it's called Split View Presets. So I've talked about how I like to do split screen multitasking on the Mac. I don't like to use the native, official split view for Mac, which
I don't either.
Takes you into a separate full screen space, right? I like to use my main desktop. I like to use my one space that I have. I just use the desktop. I've changed something. We talked about changing how we use apps and how we use devices in the pre-show for App Stories Plus. But something else that I've changed a few weeks ago, and now that change is part of me, John, is I now keep the dock hidden on my MacBook Pro.
Oh, interesting. I did that for years, and I've been toying with that idea again because I
Yeah.
I used to have a hidden menu bar too, Federico.
Oh, that's a bridge too far for me at the moment, I think. But I hit the dock, and honestly, it's been fine for a couple of reasons. One, I don't need to see the active app indicators and make sure
No.
that the icon is jumping up and down in the dock, because on these computers with Apple Silicon, with the M1 Max on this MacBook Pro, everything is so instant and fast. I don't need to keep an eye on the icons. Second, when I'm dragging something over a shortcut applet in the dock, when I hover over the side of the screen, the dock appears anyway. So I can get to the dock if I want to by just placing the mouse over it, and that's fine. And lastly, I wanted to maximize screen space, right? And so with the dock always hidden, the kind of split view that I like to do has a few extra pixels that I can use, essentially. And the split view that I like to do is just splitting the screen in half. So one window resized to fill the left half of the screen, and another window resized to fill the right half of the screen. This way, I'm not in full screen, and if I want to, and I do this all the time, I can use the bottom left hot corner of the Mac to show my desktop quickly. I do this hundreds of times per day. If I want to take something from the desktop, like a screenshot or a file, and take it and drop it into the app that I'm using, all I need to do is just hit the bottom left hot corner, grab the file, bottom left hot corner again, my windows are back, and I can drop the file. Like, it's second nature at this point, and it's something that I really miss from the iPad. That said, splitting the screen in two, right? So I have two windows, and I wanna have one on the left, one on the right. So I've done these kinds of shortcuts before. There's one on Mac Stories that lets you manually pick the windows and choose this one goes on the left, this one goes on the right. But for this week's shortcut, the one called Split View Presets, I thought, well, there's something that I noticed about myself is that I have these frequently used combinations of apps, right? So I often do Safari and Obsidian together when I'm editing a draft for an article I'm working on. Or I often do Safari and Messages together if I want to, copy links to articles or Reddit posts or tweets and share them with my friends on iMessage, usually to make fun of them. I do that all the time. So I have these combinations of apps that I use on a regular basis. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if these were like presets, right? Like pre-assembled combinations of apps. And if I could pick one from a list of these presets, and shortcuts would take care of recreating that workspace for me. And that's what this shortcut does, right? You can come up with your own combinations of apps. There's a list at the top of the shortcut that you can customize. The syntax is very simple. All you need to do is Safari plus, as a plus character, notes. Or, Obsidian plus mail. Like, it's very easy to create your own presets just by typing the names of the apps you wanna use. The first app goes on the left. The second app goes on the right. And then shortcuts uses, it's a nice combination of like different kinds of actions, but it splits this list of apps, takes the one on the left and uses the resize window action to put it on the left, and then takes the one on the right and uses the same resize window action to put it on the right side of the screen. Pretty easily, very nice. But as I was putting this together, John, I ran into a problem, which was, well, what happens if the preset you've chosen, the app isn't actually running? What happens if the app isn't running because you haven't opened it at all today? Or what happens if the app is running but no windows are open at the moment, right? Well, the find window action in shortcuts fails in that case, because you're telling shortcuts find a window for, Google Chrome. But if Google Chrome is not running, there's no window to find, right? So the action gives you an error. And I thought, well, that's inconvenient because I don't want to have the overhead of making sure that all my presets are running before I test the shortcut. So I came up with a workaround that is actually an interesting technique that you can reuse in any other kind of shortcut that deals with finding windows and resizing windows on the Mac. And that is, I check for the error. So if no results are found by the find windows action, And this is very easy to do. You can just drag in an if block and you say if window does not have any value, right? In shortcuts, that means there's no window. Like I tried to look for a window, but there's no window. So if it doesn't have any value, I used a shell script to activate the app for me before trying again. So that's the idea, right? If no window is found, we need to activate the app because it's not running or maybe because it doesn't have any windows. Shortcuts has a run shell script action. This is where it gets complicated, so bear with me.
Why aren't you doing just like an open app action there?
Right. So I tried to use the open app action and I tried to use the run Apple script action. Okay?
Right.
The problem is that these actions, they need to be dynamic. They need to support a variable, right?
Right.
Because we have, say, 20 presets, right? And 20 presets means 40 different apps. My shortcut saves the app on the left and app on the right into a variable, right? So it changes depending on what you choose. The open app action in shortcuts and the run Apple script action, they do not support variables.
Yeah, they have to hard code the name of the app into the action.
Exactly. So it cannot be dynamic. You got to choose it up front, which of course defeats the whole idea of having presets.
Right.
So I found a loophole. And the loophole is, this is ridiculous, but again, it's why we're doing this episode. You can call an Apple script from a shell script, and in that case, you can use variables. So you can see the screenshot in the article. There's a terminal command called OSA script. OSA script is basically a shell command that lets you run Apple script syntax in the shell. So all we need to do is OSA script and then, opening quotes, activate application, and then there's the variable called app name, and that's it. So if the shortcut doesn't find any windows, it says, I haven't found any windows, which means this app is probably not activated yet. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to activate the app. Now, I also ran into another weird bug, which is, you can see in the shortcut, I use this script action twice because sometimes activating the app once was not enough.
Oh, so it would just not do anything?
It would just not do anything. So I found that activating the app twice, like literally, to make sure, like, yes, please activate it. Like,
yeah,
twice.
I really mean it. I really mean it, shortcuts.
So it activates the app twice. Then I added a 2-second delay, right? Just to make sure that maybe, the app is launching, maybe it's bitch balling for a second. I don't know. I had a 2-second delay. And then it tries again to find a window. And at that point, it says, yeah, I can find a window now. And I'm going to put it on the left or I'm going to put it on the right. So what's the takeaway here? Obviously, the first takeaway is you can combine visual actions and scripting actions in shortcuts for Mac. That is, I think, the most important aspect of shortcuts on Monterey. Combining the new world of visual actions with the legacy world of scripting actions. And the result, I think, is greater than the sum of the two parts together. Like having the convenience of visual actions and the power of the shell or Apple script is incredible. And that's the first takeaway. The other is there will be edge cases in your shortcuts, in your automations. There will be errors. If you want to make a shortcut that is shareable, that is reliable, and that stands the tests of time and of different configurations, right? Because, hey, I have a MacBook Pro. Maybe you don't have a MacBook Pro that is as fast as mine. Consider all these errors. Consider all these edge cases and try to catch them. This is a very programmer mentality, if you think about it. Like, try to catch errors and deal with them. That's just good programming. It's good design. And you can apply that technique to your shortcuts building as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I ran into something similar from a design standpoint when I was doing my MyTunes shortcut, which I can talk about in a little while.
Yes, I want to know about that.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Collide. Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable. Instead of frustrating your employees, Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems. Visit collide.com/appstories to sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Enter your email when prompted to receive your free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. At Collide, they know that end users are IT administrators' most significant untapped resource and key to solving the most challenging to fix security issues, including instructing developers to set passphrases on unencrypted SSH keys, finding plain text two-factor backup codes and teaching end users how to store them securely, convincing employees to uninstall evil browser extensions that may sell their browser history, and a whole lot more. You can try Collide with all of its features for an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days, no credit card required. Try it out today at collide.com/appstories. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show and all of Automation April. All right. What else should we cover, Federico? Do you want me to cover one of mine, or do you want to go on with another?
Go with one of yours, yes.
All right. I want to start, before we get to the MyTunes thing, I do want to talk about timestamp notes a little bit, which this is, I saw very early on. Yeah, I think you've probably seen these stories that both Jason Snell and Dan Morin did on Six Colors about basically creating timestamp notes for podcasts, for times when they hear something in one of the shows that they're recording where they want to go back and do an edit. And I think they ended up doing a series of like 4, 5, maybe even 6 stories about this as they kind of refined this shortcut. And when I saw the very first one that Jason did, which relied very heavily, I think, in that initial pass on AppleScript, I thought, I bet there's a way to do this without AppleScript. So I started tinkering around and I came up with something. And I tried using it a little bit, but it just wasn't for me because it wasn't anything that was wrong with the shortcut. It was more that it didn't fit really well with my own workflow with the way I do editing on podcasts. But then I got to thinking that, timestamps are valuable in a lot of different circumstances.
Yeah.
And the place that I really have felt the need for timestamps more than anything is with video, because whether it's an Apple event or a WWDC video, a lot of times if I'm taking notes as I watch video, the frustrating part is going back and finding the spot in the video where the notes were taken so I can, maybe see a detail that I didn't really understand in my notes or something like that. And when it comes to like Apple events, that's valuable. Having timestamps is valuable because I don't have the time to scrub through a long video to find something specific if I'm trying to get a story out. And with WWDC, it's valuable because I may watch a session video, but not actually write that part of my annual review until later in the summer. So in both cases, it's kind of nice to have, it would be nice to have timestamps associated with those notes. So what I did is I created a 3-step process for taking notes, or three shortcuts. The first one is really just about getting that initial timestamp correct, because you need to get, what you want to have something that says, this is the time I started watching. And so you want to have basically the play button start on the video and the timestamp recorded simultaneously so that your timestamps are as close to real at the time of the video as possible. And to do that, I ended up experimenting with a lot of different techniques here, but the thing that was critical was to get the playback and that first timestamp as close in time together as possible. And what I found was the fastest was using Better Touch Tool and its ability to send key presses to shortcuts, which Shortcuts does not support natively, and I hope it does eventually. Mm-hmm. But so what I do is basically I get the video ready to go. I run this shortcut. All it does is hit the space bar basically, so that because most video players support that.
Okay.
That gets the video going. Then it very quickly does a date calculation, takes the current date formatted as the time on the clock. and it adds the word start after that, copies it to the clipboard, and then switches over to my text editor where I'm taking notes and pastes in that timestamp. So at the top of my notes, I'll have, like if it's 9 in the morning, it'll be 0900 start. And then from there on, I just go through and I continue to take notes. And as I want to add timestamps, I have a separate shortcut called Timestamper, which basically does a very similar thing, but it doesn't need to, deal with hitting play on the video player and creates a new timestamp. Now, there are other ways to do this. I actually find specifically in Obsidian, which is where I usually take these kind of notes, that there are plugins. There's a natural language dates, I think is the name of the plugin, that can do timestamps, and it's faster because it's built into the app. But you can do it with this timestamper shortcut too, which just creates the timestamp and a space after it, and then you continue taking your notes. The real magic, I guess, of this setup is the third shortcut called Timestamp Converter, because that's where I figure out the math to turn those timestamps, which are based on the clock. They're not, if you watch a video, it starts at 000000. Mm-hmm. But if you're taking notes and using timestamps, you're using the clock. And I use a 24-hour clock, which is important for the math. But you take your notes, and they're based on the clock. So what you need to do is roll those back to that first one back to 0, and then add all the other ones back so that they're based on what's in the video. So not if it starts at 9 a.m., 9 a.m. becomes 000000. And doing that, what ended up being, and I've talked about this before, but the trick ended up being figuring out that midnight on any particular day is 0000. So I start this process by coordinating that first timestamp that's based on the clock with the specified date action of midnight of the same day. So it rolls it back to 0. And then I just calculate the differences between each of those timestamps using, I find the timestamps with regex, and then I calculate the differences using the time between dates, I think it's called action, and do that in seconds. And then I just repeat over those, adding those seconds to each of the timestamps, and then reassemble the whole thing. And at the end, I've got what I want. I've got timestamps that begin at 0 and then increment coordinated with the video timestamps. And it's fast enough, it's close enough with doing these shortcuts that maybe it's, half a second or a second off here and there, but it's close enough to be able to find your spot again really quickly. And it's been, so it's been really handy. And that's, that process. What's nice about the last shortcut, which is called Timestamp Converter, is that you don't have, that's not something you have to run until you're finished taking your notes. Once your notes are all done and you've got all these timestamps, you just run it, and it'll copy everything to the clipboard, and then you can paste it right over the old notes or underneath the notes wherever you want in a new document, and you're done, and you can go from there.
Very nice. I love this entire setup that you have going on, and I cannot wait to test it for WWDC, right? For session videos and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's where it's going to come in most handy for me. I did use it during the last Apple event, and it was useful, but I didn't have as many spots. Sometimes I feel like I need to go back in the video. This time around, I didn't really feel like it, but I know with WWDC session videos, I always have some occasion where I want to go back and hear someone say something again. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by SourceGraph. These days, every company needs to be a tech company because there's so much code to deal with. It's hard to have any kind of online presence or digital service without copious amounts of code. And code affects everyone. It's the foundation of the technology we use every single day. But handling big databases can be tricky, especially when you think about the volume and variety of code. So thankfully, SourceGraph is here to solve all of your company's code-related headaches. They're tackling big code. More than ever, companies need resources to increase developer velocity, to give people what they need to be agile, innovative, and productive. With SourceGraph, developers can figure out how to use a particular function, find and solve problems more quickly, identify what impact a code change will have on its dependencies, and so much more. SourceGraph is the future of how companies are built, and it's powering the infrastructure of today's most successful, high-growth businesses, including 3 out of 5 of the biggest tech companies. SourceGraph's current customers include PayPal, Uber, Plaid, Reddit, Atlassian, and many more. If your company uses code, you need SourceGraph. Go now to about.sourcegraph.com. That's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why some of the biggest tech companies in the world use SourceGraph and to see what it can do for yours. Our thanks to SourceGraph for the support of the show.
All right, so the next shortcut I want to talk about is a shortcut and personal automation that I shared last week on Mac Stories. It's called clean up Twitter links. So the idea is that, well, first let me explain why. I've been testing the official Twitter client again, and I don't know about my timing considering all the things that are going on with Twitter at the moment. As we're recording this, we still don't know whether Twitter will accept or decline Elon Musk's offer to buy the company. We're recording this on Thursday, my afternoon, Italian time. So we'll see what happens. So yeah, I don't know about my timing when it comes to trying the Twitter app again. Who knows if we will be using Twitter for our 10th anniversary of App Stories, John. We'll see. But I don't know. I wanted to see how it's changed and to try Twitter Blue. Also, the potential of an editing feature coming soon for subscribers is very appealing to me because I cannot stand having typos in my tweets. And I know that I will, once, if they really allow for editing, I know that I will go back in time and fix some of the typos that have stuck with me in my tweets. So, I wanted to check out the official client again, see some of the latest features, and try out the algorithmic timeline again. In doing this, I noticed that now Twitter appends new and ugly tracking parameters to links to tweets. So when you copy a link to a tweet because you want to share it in Discord or because you want to share it on iMessage or something, that link is so ugly now because it has additional junk at the end of the text. It's like all these tracking parameters that Twitter is attaching to URLs now. So I thought, well, this is inconvenient. I really dislike having this non-vanilla links for tweets. So I started thinking, I bet I can use regular expressions to match the vanilla tweet and remove everything else. And I got that working pretty quickly. It was pretty easy, remove tracking parameters from tweets, from URLs is something that I've done before. But the problem was I needed to figure out how to make this part of Twitter itself, meaning I didn't want to have to explicitly and manually share a tweet with my shortcut every single time I wanted to share the tweet. So I started thinking, how can I make this as seamless as possible? Obviously, you cannot have shortcuts running in the background all the time, monitoring things, although, there's an argument to be made as to whether that should be something that shortcuts can do, but, that's a topic for another time. But I realized something, and this is the lesson here, which is, we mentioned this before, but take a look at how you do things. Take a look at how you use your devices, because sometimes you can find an idea for a shortcut even in the most trivial of your habits, of your patterns, of the things that you do. And something that I do, and that I noticed, is every time I find a funny tweet, I copy the link to the tweet, I close Twitter, and I open iMessage or I open Discord and I paste that link.
Mm-hmm.
You see where I'm going here, which is, in this habit of mine, in this pattern of mine, there is one constant, and that constant is I close Twitter to paste the link somewhere else. I close Twitter, and that closing Twitter can be an automation trigger. that was the sort of the epiphany that I had. If every single time I find a funny tweet and I close Twitter to paste that tweet somewhere else, that closing the Twitter app can be a trigger for a Shortcuts automation, because now Shortcuts lets you do a personal automation, and the trigger can be app is closed.
I wonder why you do that, because actually I do the same thing. I copy it and then I close it and move on to another app.
I don't know
why. Instead of using the share sheet, because you could use the share sheet.
That says a lot about the share sheet,
hard,
though, right?
It's a little hard to get to the share sheet in the Twitter app, I guess.
And I don't know. And sometimes the share sheet gets kind of stuck. Sometimes the keyboard doesn't come up. I don't know.
It's buggy lately.
It's buggy.
The share sheet.
It's buggy.
Yep.
And I prefer to switch back to the full app, and also some apps are not integrated with the share sheet at all. So my brain is now conditioned to think you got to close Twitter and you got to open the destination app where you want to paste the link. But now app is closed can be a trigger. And so I set it up, and very quickly I came up with a system where whenever I find a tweet that I want to share with my friends or on Discord with our members, it all happens naturally. Meaning, when I close Twitter, Shortcuts activates in the background. I don't see anything, right? I just see the privacy banner that iOS displays when the clipboard gets accessed in the background.
Right.
The little pill-shaped indicator at the top of the screen. I get that. But Shortcuts does its thing. It says, okay, I see you've closed Twitter. Let me confirm that in your clipboard is a link to a tweet, right? Because I may have copied a link to an article, or I may have copied a link to a profile, right? Those don't need to be cleaned up, obviously. So let me confirm that you have a tweet. If you have a tweet, I'm gonna clean it up for you, and I'm gonna put back into the clipboard the cleaned version of the link. That was the big realization that I had here. There's something that I do, which is I close Twitter to open something else. That something can become an automation trigger. Now, when I open iMessage, the moment that I hit paste, the shortcut has already run and the tweet has already been cleaned, and my friends or members of the Discord don't have to see the ugly URL anymore.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by RevenueCat. If you're a developer, your time should be spent focused on what makes your app special, not hassling with StoreKit. In-app subscriptions are critical to a lot of app success, but getting the infrastructure right is tough. That is, of course, unless you're using RevenueCat. RevenueCat is payments infrastructure simplified. You don't have to worry about managing servers or writing complex back-end code. They take care of all of that for you. What's more, RevenueCat is cross-platform, so when you decide to expand beyond iOS to Android or the web, you can still use RevenueCat. RevenueCat lets you sync status across all of your customers' devices, and it has terrific out-of-the-box analytics to help you track your revenue, customer retention, and churn, so you're always on top of how your business is performing. RevenueCat integrates in-app purchase data with best-in-class tools, too, and it's trusted by over 9,000 apps, including ones like Notion, StockTwits, and photography app VSCO. Set up RevenueCat today. Integrating with your app will take just hours, not days. So what are you waiting for? Visit RevenueCat.com to learn more today. Again, that URL is RevenueCat.com. Our thanks to RevenueCat for their support of the show. Oh, that's wonderful. I like that. I think that those URLs are fairly recent in Twitter history. I don't know, but it's nice that you can do that. That's fantastic. All right, Federico, why don't we talk a little bit about MyTunes, which is my latest shortcut, which has a bit of a history. So I have forever wanted to have a way to easily get music videos onto screens, particularly my Apple TV, on my TV screen using the Apple TV, but also on my iPhone and iPad. And I've never come up with a really good solution. I've wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. One is just to enjoy them. Sometimes, though, it's like, wanting to check out new things, kind of a watch later type of situation. But I've never had a good solution. And then when Play came out by Marcos Tanaka, I saw the possibility of something taking shape that I could take advantage of, because I already knew that Downey by Charlie Monroe Software, which is a utility on the Mac for downloading video off of YouTube, that app had the ability to do that automatically. And I had been poking around in Downey and saw that it had added a handful of shortcuts actions. And one of them is it can extract YouTube URLs from text and start the downloads. And then in the preferences of the app, you can set it up so it does so automatically without you having to be there monitoring the download and picking a save destination and things like that. And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder what that would be good for. And then as Play came along, and Play has the ability to take, it's for saving YouTube videos to watch later, but it's not actually saving the videos. It's basically bookmarking the videos, saving the URLs along with a lot of metadata so that you can go through them and watch them at your leisure. And as a result of that, its shortcuts actions lets you look at the things you've saved, filter them, and sort them in a bunch of different ways, including by tag. So that's when I had kind of the light bulb went off in my head. I thought, whoa, I see what I can do here. I can tag videos that I want to watch later or music videos I just want to enjoy later. I can tag them with music video. Then I can use Play's actions to extract those URLs, send them to Downey, and then download them automatically. And that gets me a folder of all these videos. But I didn't have a good playback scheme yet. And I had been playing, that's probably where this goes back the furthest, is I've tried a bunch of different ways to do this over the years. And Plex is pretty good at this in that, Plex really, you can point it at any local folder and play things. And it has a shuffle button, which comes in handy for this. But it wasn't quite, I'm not a big fan of Plex's UI. I mean, I do use Plex, but I prefer to use apps that tie into Plex. And then I tried Infuse for a while, and Infuse is pretty good. It works well. It hooks into Plex, and it can shuffle videos. And that's a good alternative. But I find Infuse a little fiddly too. And then I realized that channels, which I was already using for over-the-air TV, was potentially the perfect solution. And last fall, I think it was last fall, sometime last year, they introduced a new feature called virtual channels. And virtual channels, as originally conceived, were for things like, let's say you have all the Godfather movies collected as files locally. You can create a virtual channel that will play back all those Godfather movies either in order or randomly or, a bunch of different ways you can do it as a channel in the Channels app. And that allows it to sit kind of alongside regular channels, things that are over the air, which is kind of interesting. And I think it works particularly well for things like maybe you have every episode of Big Bang Theory ever produced, because there's a lot of those, right? And you can play them in order or randomly or whatever you want. And it's one of those things where people like, I think sometimes, not to have to choose what they watch. They just want to put something on and have something come up. And that's where virtual channels are really good. The problem with the original virtual channels feature is that it only worked for movies and TV shows. That's where channels kind of started, was with those two categories. So everything had to fall into one of those buckets. And I thought, well, I bet I could make a virtual channel for these music videos. But then the problem was I had to dump dozens of music videos into either TV shows or movies where it just becomes a mess with all the other kinds of content. They changed that. They now allow you to point to any folder, and they call it, for other videos. It could be home movies. It could be music videos like I'm doing. It could be a lot of different things that don't fit neatly into TV shows or movies. And so now what I've done is I've created a folder. So I have this folder. It sits on a drive connected to my 2018 Mac Mini. It's hooked into Plex. Channels looks at that folder and indexes it. and I created a virtual channel, which all I had to do that was to give it a name, give it some artwork, which I created some fun artwork for it that's like iPod based, and then point it at that folder. And now channel 1, when I open up the Channels app, is my tunes, and it's a random selection of music videos that I've created. Now, from a shortcut standpoint, I went through a lot of iterations of this and boiled it down to something incredibly simple, almost embarrassingly simple, you would say. But the way I started it, when I first looked at it, I thought, well, what I need a way to check for newly tagged videos in Play. And so I came up with this system which worked, but had some weird edge cases where I was writing the date out to a text file, checking it at the beginning of the shortcut, and then only picking up the videos that had been tagged since the last time I ran the shortcut and doing it that way. But if you wanted to run the shortcut more than once in a day, that became kind of problematic for dealing with. And I ran into some problems too, where I originally split this into 2 shortcuts, thinking, well, Downey's only on the Mac, so I want to run this on my iPad and my iPhone. So I'll split that shortcut out separately, tie them together with Hazel. But then I ran into some issues with Hazel's integration with shortcuts, which it was throwing errors occasionally. So what I ultimately ended up doing was boiling this down to just six actions, where it goes and it grabs the videos out of Play based on the tag. Then it takes those URLs and imports them directly into Downey, because the Play lets you pick the variable you use can be the URL. It can be all the different metadata that Play collects. So I just picked the URL, drop that directly into the download action from Downey, wait for a couple of minutes to make sure that the videos, because if it's a lot of videos, it might take a little while to download. Make sure all the downloads are finished. And then I go through and iterate over the videos in Play and remove the tag. And that was kind of the key insight, where I was like, I don't really need all this date stuff. I can just remove the tag each time. And then next time I run it, it'll only pick up the ones that have been newly tagged. So you remove the tag and quit Downey. And that's the whole shortcut right there.
I love it. I want to set up the system this weekend, and I want to see if I can also get it to work. Yeah, I love it.
The good thing about it was in testing it, this came together relatively recently. And the good thing about testing is I just was going through the music app and some of the current songs I was listening to and downloading video after video after video. So now I have a pretty big collection just from the testing process, and it'll just grow from there. Because I think, one of the reasons I did this is that the way I find videos I want to watch, music videos in particular, is by reading websites like Chorus FM and Pitchfork, or seeing them on Twitter, that kind of thing. I could just create a music video playlist on my Mac in Music and do it that way. But that's not how I really consume music videos, through the music app. I find them elsewhere, and this is a good way to watch them that way. All right, Federico, that was a good discussion. It's I think we're gonna, maybe we'll talk about some of these shortcuts some more in the future as well. It's been good to get some of your thoughts on what's going on. Mm-hmm. All right, I want to thank our 3 sponsors for this episode again. That's Collide, SourceGraph, and RevenueCat. If you'd like longer, extended versions of the show in high bitrate audio that are delivered a day early and ad-free, you can go to appstories.plus to check out our subscriptions and subscribe there. You can find Federico and me over at MacStories. That's macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram too, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.